as a salesperson coming up the ranks of various type of companies, primarily a large multinational, I will tell you firsthand that it takes great marketing to get things started, but nothing happens until somebody sells something. So for me, looking at the industry and listening to our speakers here, it brings together the thought of preparation, 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 and understanding the different functional elements of running a business. So for us, looking at the go-to-market strategy, it's really essential that we understand where things are coming from and why things are the way they are. So in the United States, for those of you who come from overseas, we call it a three-tier system. And the reason for that was because of prohibition years ago. And it's really, in essence, a control mechanism that's been put in place in order to collect excise taxes. That's essentially what it is. So first tier, suppliers, second tier, distributors, and then you have the retailer. That's what we call the three-tier system. In the more recent past, we faced a consolidation of distribution in the United States, which threw everything into chaos. Because while in the past we had multiple distributors in a given market to enable us to take our small brands to market, today we have these large conglomerates with some small distributors, but the large conglomerates are taking a lion's share of the attention that's coming from the big suppliers. So a lot of Europeans like to come into the US and they want to align with the big distributors. Let me tell you, it's going to be a challenge. It's a challenge for the big suppliers to compete in those big houses. Imagine when you're coming in and trying to develop a brand and you're going into one of these large distributors. So for us, looking at it, you got to say to yourself, well, my distribution selection process really needs to be evaluated. And you got to look at it in several different ways. You have to take a look at it from an open state, from a control state, and by the way, there's such a thing called a franchise state, which Donna talked about earlier. Be careful here. I would advise anyone that's entering a market to really consider franchise states later in the stages of development than early on. Because as she noted, if you make that decision early and you decide that that situation doesn't really bode well for you long term, for you to leave that state or leave that distributor, it's almost impossible. I can tell you firsthand, I've been in lawsuits in states like Massachusetts. It's been very, very difficult to pull a brand out of Massachusetts. New Jersey is another one of those states. So as soon as you hear franchise state, please, please, please let those warning lights go off and seek an alternative state to enter, because your decision early on, which may seem insignificant because you have friends that are in that market or the potential you think is great, but long term, that's what you need to really take a look at. So be careful with the concept of which states I want to launch into. Another thing to keep in mind is that before you start expanding, test your product. If you have the time, my recommendation is test 2 different price points, test 2 different types of states, test, and test quickly. You can get an assessment of how well your concept is being accepted fairly quickly if you plan accordingly and you put the metrics in place to understand what constitutes a win. And that win needs to be replicatable. So that's really key. So when you look at it and you're starting to consider a distribution test, take a look at a test, meaning chain store test versus an independent type retail store test versus an on-premise led test. And then you want to start to see the reorder rates, because the first order you sell out or you sell into a retailer is your easiest sale. Your more difficult sale is your second sale and your third sale and your fourth sales. Those are the ones that really matter, especially to the chain players. So I would start to take a look at which of the accounts that I want to go to. And someone mentioned earlier, ask around. Ask a lot of stupid questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Who are the top accounts off-premise? Who are the top accounts on-premise? Who are the top accounts, period, in the industry? And then you can break those down depending on how well you have defined your target consumer. Essential to understand where your source of business is going to come from. So in essence, what you're doing is you're starting to take a look at what I call being in the right accounts, also known as weighted distribution. I want to come to that a little later because it's really critical for those of you who don't have a ton of money to invest in trying to get to mass distribution right off the bat. So account selection, being in the right accounts, and again, what are the right accounts? It's a simple question to ask your distributor. How many accounts do 80% of the business in this category? In New York, I know New York like the back of my hand, there are 1,400 licensed accounts off-premise. Out of those 1,400 accounts, out of 1,400, 700, half, do 85% of your business. It changes by category, but on the whole, I'm not too far off to say that if I'm in 700 accounts, I am doing pretty darn well on the return on my investment in that level of distribution. Okay? So now we go to the next evaluator. So you have quality distribution is one. Fish where the fish are is a common phrase that we've often used. But in reality, how often do the accounts that you got distribution in reorder after 60 days? A key measure of conversation with your distributor, because they're going to know the answer before you do, and they're going to test you. And if they don't know the answer, you have to make it your business to force them to kind of look at your business and gauge whether you're getting the reorder rates or they're getting the reorder rates required to move on, to expand distribution. Normally, my percentage that I like to see is around 35 to 45% reorder rates after 60 days. Some people gauge it after 45 days. My range is 45 to 60. So if I have 100 accounts, I'd like to see 45 accounts reordering after 45 to 60 days. Now you're starting to create a success story. Lastly, and this is really important, we're looking at conversion rates. How do conversion rates really work? Well, our friend here in marketing took a chunk of money from the finance guy after the lawyer put together a beautiful contract, and they decided to do tastings. So they're legal, right? Legal tastings in store with a target consumer in mind, with all the merchandising and all the trimmings to make the brand really appealing to your consumer, and they started to measure. Why is measurement important? Because if you don't measure and you don't know where you stand, you can't go to the finance guy and ask for more money. That's a real challenge. So one of my pet peeves in my entire career is seeing people not plan. People fall down on execution of marketing plans. They don't really measure, and therefore the evaluation process is flawed. So if you're running a test, how can you not do all these things and have these things lined up to be able to expand to other markets? So proof of concept is a term that we often use to see whether you have a viable brand opportunity to really, really drive it to new heights. So you got to take a look at all the aspects of what is going to constitute your selling story. To begin with, is your brand going to cannibalize or expand the category? Most big buyers in advanced markets don't want to hear that you are essentially not improving the size of the category. In other words, you're cannibalizing one product at the expense of another. Don't go there. If you haven't checked that box that says, I am going to increase the share of the category because I'm going to bring in new consumers to the category, you got a challenge in your hand. So that becomes a question mark in your overall strategy. You go on to the next one. Is my brand well differentiated? I must salute my colleague here, my friend, Humberto, because I think that without research, at least professional research from a service that most marketeers would pay for, but he's got something in his head that a lot of people don't have. And that's a curiosity factor. You all have it. You just got to ask the questions and understand, am I producing an item, a brand, that is fully differentiated, that at some point will have relevance to that target consumer? Now I sound like a marketeer. Key, do you have enough weight in the investment dollars to be able to gain the right level of awareness? A lot of people will buy a media plan and not have enough dollars in their media plan to deliver the gross ratings that you want to reach that target consumer. If you're not going to have the right reach, save your money. Do something else, because the money is precious. Is your brand story based on intrinsics or extrinsic values? You know, I walked around a lot this show. I love the entrepreneurial nature of our industry. It's only one of a kind. And I will tell you that a lot of people want to outdo another competing brand in that category by saying they have, i.e., more botanicals. I have, a special water. My water is better than your water. And what really sells at the end of the day, it's not what's in the bottle. The bottle, we're going to assume it's pretty darn good to begin with. What really sells is how you dress it up. And we call that the intrinsic values, the positioning of the brand in the eyes of that consumer. It's key. So after you do all that, then you start to measure everything else. This is the brand on the right-hand corner that I'm now representing. It's a ready-to-serve, not a ready-to-drink. I'm trying to make sure that there's a distinction between the two. And we have done that test. We ran the test in 2 states, in New Jersey. Unfortunately, it was before I came into the picture. I would never have done a test in New Jersey, and New York. And within 9 months, a small distributor, so to begin with, you don't have to always be with a big distributor. A small distributor was able to get it into the best 350 accounts in New Jersey and the best 50 to 75 accounts in New York, and we depleted 17,000 cases. Now, I've been measuring reorder rates. I've been measuring conversion rates. When I went to see an importer to expand nationally with those kind of figures, let me tell you, they were bending backwards to sign a contract with me because of those test results. It sells itself if you've got the documentation and you got the things in place that matter. So proof of concept, it's really, really key. If, for example, I'm going to give you a cause and effect for a moment. You launch your brand. You keep on pushing the distributor to get you distribution. You throw more dollars at getting distribution. And the reorder rate doesn't go up. The distribution is nothing but, oh my God, here comes Jose. He's going to push another 50 points of distribution on me. Then I'm going to go and we're going to say, well, I keep on trying to ask for a work with so I can get salespeople to work with me, and they see me coming, they go into the bathroom. They walk away from me. I'm going to give you the opposite of what normally happens when you have a successful brand on your hands and you've done all the things right. Your reorder rates are up to industry norms or higher. Your distributor sees little cannibalization and can't wait to talk to you about the next set of programs that you have coming. Your distribution gains are not a push. The distribution gains are organic. You know why? Because the best form of advertising was one retailer tells the other, hey, are you carrying this product? It's flying off my shelves. Or they're saying, these guys support their brand, they have a tasting program, they've come here and trained my staff, and the brand is turning. And lastly, the real test is when salespeople call you at home and ask you for help to sell more and more accounts. That's when you have a win. So highly differentiated concept, relevant to the consumer, and then you're applying all the other things that we talked about, and the distribution gains will begin to work on your behalf. So prioritization, a lot of people want to launch in big markets. You know how much it costs to enter a market like New York, Chicago, LA, or Miami? It is exorbitant. I personally would have chosen a Tampa, in Indianapolis, in Nashville. I would have tested a test market, chain-oriented state versus an independent state or a hybrid like Illinois, which has chains and independents, to really see what the offtake is and what the consumer acceptance is of your brand. Franchise states, again, I would wait until I have proof of concept before I go into those states. And let's talk about control states. To me, I love control states. And I'm not a control freak. I hate controls. I hate condominium boards and all that. But I will tell you that control states gives you the most inexpensive way of testing a product because it's very, very evenly distributed in terms of the asks of suppliers. They also have a margin requirement that's different, and it has kind of a little bit less in the middle that you don't have to offer all the margins. So typically, quite often, you tend to make just a little more margin dollars in control states than you do in open states, because you have more competition in open states. So now let's talk about the route to market model, because this is key now. Now, the wheel is starting to really hit the road here, because this is what it's all about. You got your contracts in place, you got the financing going on, the marketing has done its job. Now comes distribution. Where do I go? Well, you know, this one supplier is a big supplier. They have a great relationship with either RNDC, Southern, Breakthrough, and I'm gonna go to these guys first just to see if they're willing to accept my brand, because I think it's gonna be a faster build out if I go with them. Let me eliminate a quick, what's the word I want to use? An assumption that it's actually false, okay? And that is that your big suppliers are going to give you all the attention and they're going to really push that distributor to sell your brand. I don't think so. Number one, those big suppliers are protecting their own brands that have taken them 150 years to develop. Number two, the distributors themselves know that very few brands represent 80% of their profits. Very few brands represents 80% of the profits, meaning that if they have 12,000 SKUs, okay, do you think that they're going to make a difference by having another 2 or 3 SKUs? I don't think so. So in here, smaller suppliers will find it a challenge to give attention to their own brands. So you got to really think through the partnership arrangements that you're going to have as you go to distribution. This last point, a lot of people take for granted, and I want to bring it in as an example of just a little tidbit that doesn't usually happen in distributor contracts, but I'm going to give it to you from someone who's worked with a lot of distributors, and I negotiated a 35-state distributor contract with Southern. Most distributors are managing what we call in the industry work-withs. Sometimes they give you 1 a quarter, or they give you one every other month, or they give you one per month. One. If our job as suppliers is to motivate distributor salespeople to sell our brand, and we don't have access to them, how can we build a relationship where they'll sell our brands at the same time they're selling other brands? So please consider, when you're negotiating, putting a little clause in there that says, I like to work and start with once a week, okay? And if you get 2 work weeks a month, you're ahead of the game. If you don't put it in your contract, they don't have to give you a single day to work with their salespeople. Good luck. Just a little tidbit from experience. Another approach would be to seek an importer who has a relationship with a distributor network that has some relevance to them. So in this example here, importers like working with brand owners that give them time and attention during those nurturing years. So in my case, with this new brand that I'm launching, I went with a mid-size importer because they have a defined portfolio. They're not necessarily brand collectors at this point yet, and they are willing to work with a supplier like myself to develop the brand with them in true partnership. So you have different types of importers. Please look them up, evaluate their portfolios, take a look at if their way of going to market mirrors what you believe in, and you got yourself a fighting chance to really getting on with it. And what's nice about these importers is that they have relationships across the entire gamut of distributors. So they're not married to any one distributor. They really pick and choose the best distributors for that brand, for that market, which I think is really, really important for all of you and for all of us who are trying to nurture brands into becoming big brands. Then, of course, you have, I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to get $2 million of investor money, and I'm going to put together an organization with 7 people, a national sales manager, a marketing manager, okay? And I'm going to go to market. I think that in this case, I'm not sure that there's enough of a return on investment for the price you pay for having control. Because if I were you, I'd rather invest my money in marketing than I would in trying to keep a sense of control on my brand. Control comes later. Believe me, it comes later. So most of the brand building that goes in, please invest it in activities that are going to drive revenue for A, the retailer, B, your distributor. And as you begin to grow dollars, you'll be able to do more investing in other areas and become more and more important to your distributor, who in the end is going to be your lifeline to success. Looking at this chart, there's a lot of people that want to enter a market, and they go and they program a distributor, and they say, I want 75% distribution in 6 months. You spend a ton of money, I have it in red, because brand building takes time. There are no shortcuts. Tito's was an overnight success in the last 25 years. Okay? Patron was an overnight success, and it took them 20-something years. So be patient. Start with what I call weighted distribution. Weighted distribution allows your dollars that you got from your investor to go longer. You want to stay in the game as long as you can. It's like going to Vegas and playing blackjack. You want to stay in the game. The longer you play, the more money you can make. If you start betting too big, when you get to Vegas, you'll be out of the game very quickly, and you'll be out of Vegas broke. So start off with your top A and B accounts, weighted distribution. Your concept is being measured, being evaluated, and you move on to the next. And your expectation is, your first 2 years, you want to be in your top A and B accounts. The next 3 to 5 years, you want to get to the A's and B's and some of the C's. It's going to take you 5 years or more to get into what I call mass distribution where your product is now really everywhere almost. So a quick checklist. This you can see for yourself. This is nothing but a summary of what I've talked about. Have you done your tests? Do you have the resources, both marketing and people? The right people is essential. If you go and you hire someone because you can only afford a $40,000 salary, but really 60 gets you someone with experience that can really take you across the finish line, spend the extra 20. It's the best $20,000 incrementally you've ever spent. Will your brand deliver high profits and commission to the distributor? Key, talk profits to your distributor. Talk about the growth in your revenue to that distributor. You'll have their ear. Is there a good reason for your distributor network to give you attention? Remember, they're making their money from the big suppliers. You haven't earned it yet, but you could be the next Tito's, which is really why they keep you in the game also. And the last point is, do you have the right price structure to begin with? And when you talk about the price structure, it also, you have to step it down to the level of discounts. How are they applying their discounts to the retail trade? If there's an enormous amount of money being given away to the top accounts, and you have to support that margin at the distributor with what we call in the industry DAs, depletion allowances, you'll go broke. You want a quality distribution plan that allows for the discounts that are being generated at each level, A accounts, B accounts, C accounts, to be appropriate so you have a balanced gross margin mixed to the distributor. You need to monitor that every single month. And they can give you that data, and they will give you that data. So in essence, you know, is it a daunting task? Yes. Could it be a positive approach? Absolutely. Is it key for brand building? Yes. So stay, you know, abreast of market trends, know what's going on, understand your distributor, understand how it works, essential. Stay consistent, plan your work, and then work your plan, as they say. Be patient yet impatient. You got to push, but not too hard, but you got to keep pushing. It doesn't come by, you know, automatically. It's really a marathon, okay? This is not a sprint, but you'll get there. And always remember, your distributors are your partners. They're buying the goods from you, and then they're selling it to the retailer and making a little money. So they're buying from you. They are your partners. Make sure they know it, that you're partnering with them. It's key. Thank you. Best of luck, and obviously you can really do it.